Welcome to Know This Live. I'm Zincle Esamoah. The nation has now been dealing with COVID-19 for more than a year. President Biden just marked 50 days in office, signing the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan into law, then delivering his first primetime address to the nation hours later. Joining me to discuss this and a whole lot more is White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And jumping in, I know that President Biden in his address said that he wants all U.S. states, territories, and tribes to make all adult Americans over 18 eligible for vaccines by May. We're still hearing from a number of groups, though. I'm thinking of cancer patients and communities of color, minorities, seniors, that they're having trouble making appointments. Will this new initiative cause an issue and a backlog with that?
We certainly hope not. And one of the steps he announced last night is the announcement of a new website that will go live around May 1st. That hopefully will be a resource to many of the people and communities you mentioned who just want to go online somewhere and figure out where there's vaccines, where they can find vaccines and where they can go to get access. So that's one of the pieces he just announced.
And you mentioned during today's presser that rollout of the website, which will likely be coming in May. I think of the digital divide that we're seeing in low-income communities and with seniors who might not have access. Are you worried that more tech-savvy people in the United States will have access to vaccines versus those who don't have access?
We're very focused on that and worried about it in the sense that we want to make sure we go meet people in the communities where they are. So one of the announcements he also made was a massive expansion of community health centers. He's going to expand mobile health centers that are going to be able to move directly into communities. We want to think of every way possible so that we can make this as accessible and as easy for every community to gain access to. And we're going to continue to come up with more ideas to do that. You're absolutely right. Everybody does not have access to a computer or a website. Some people do, and that will make it, and some people want greater access to make it easier to find where vaccines are available. But we need to do, this is kind of an across the board approach, and we need to use a lot of different tactics to reach people across the country and their communities.
Yeah, and I know that in addition to difficulties with signing up, there's also been expressions by health departments saying we don't have enough people to inoculate those who want to get vaccinated. So what are you all doing to incentivize individuals to volunteer?
Well, I'm so happy you raised that because that's kind of been an undercovered component of this, right? The not that we don't have enough vaccinators out there, right? So communities have vaccine supply and they don't have enough people to actually administer the shots. So one of the steps the president announced last night is that we're going to allow and ensure that people like dentists, veterinarians, local health providers of all sorts can also be vaccinators because we need to increase the number of people who can actually administer these vaccines as states and communities are getting more and more of the supply. And we expect that will continue to increase in the weeks ahead.
And the president did say that the administration is on track to hit 2 million shots a day and reach the original goal of 100 million by, I believe, in 10 days or so.
Day 60, yeah.
Yeah, and which is a big feat. But knowing all of that, he referenced pop-up clinics and drive-thrus. Can you give us more details about what programs are going to be put in place?
Sure. So we're going to expand a number of the programs we've already started. So community health centers is one of them. There's now going to be about 900 community health centers around the country and communities that will be participating in kind of this program to get them vaccine supply. We're also expanding the supply that we're sending to pharmacies across the country. That's been a program that a lot of communities have benefited from because people go, they pick up toothpaste, and then they know this is also a place I can get my vaccine. And then you mentioned mass vaccination sites. So talked about this a little bit last night, but that means you're in the car with your family, right? And maybe you're driving around running errands and you can go to a mass vaccination site. Maybe it's a soccer field, maybe it's a football field or a baseball field, and drive through and get vaccinated. We want to make this easy and accessible so it's a part of what people are planning in their lives and it doesn't feel like something they have to kind of hunt down and figure out on their own.
And of course, the other element when it comes to vaccinations is the vaccines themselves. We know Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson have been approved by the FDA. AstraZeneca has not, yet we know that other countries are moving forward with that. Can you let us know how much supply do we have of this vaccine?
We ordered, former President Trump ordered, I believe, about 30 million doses. We have a very small sliver of that number of doses that we have access to currently. And right now, we're just trying to factor in what the president's focus is on is ensuring we're getting every American vaccinated, right? And that he has a range of optionality of what he's going to utilize. We are very open and look forward to working with the global community. We've donated quite a bit of money to COVAX. He's engaging with a range of countries about how we can be helpful. And so we're going to look for ways to do that. We haven't provided vaccine doses quite yet to other countries, but it is something we will do in the future.
Okay, and knowing that, I know that President Biden also set a goal of July 4th, which a lot of people are buzzing about now, that we will get closer to normal. But can you clarify? So should we be expecting a full nationwide reopening by July 4th?
No, we should not. And I appreciate you asking that question, because what he's really talking about is what I'm calling a baby step forward. Every American will be eligible by May 1st. We will have enough vaccines to vaccinate every American by May 31st. And many people will be vaccinated before May 1st and hopefully before May 31st. But what is he is hoping is that if we continue to take the steps we need to take, get the vaccine when you're eligible, look for places in your local community. We're going to keep making it easier and easier and more accessible. Wear masks, socially distance, that by July 4th, maybe you can have some friends over to your backyard and have a barbecue. And that sounds pretty good to me. But that is not a return to normal of being out in public and in a soccer stadium with 1,000 people. We're not there yet. 1,400 people a day are still dying, but it is a step forward. And he felt it was something that would give people hope.
And one of the steps we've also seen from this administration is getting vaccines on camera. I know in my own reporting, we've heard a lot about vaccine hesitancy, especially in communities of color. Beyond speeches and rhetoric, which I think we've gotten a lot of, what is the administration doing to combat what I've heard a lot from communities of color, which is we want to wait and see? What are you doing to combat that?
Well, we have to take a number of steps. One of them is access, right? And ensuring that there are health centers that are in communities where people have trusted doctors, medical experts, nurses, maybe people they go to for regular health care, and they know they can go there and get a vaccine. That makes a difference. But also, we are going to launch a mass public campaign soon in the coming weeks. And that's something that we hope will reassure people that this is safe, it is effective, it saves lives. It will help us return to normal. But it's not one or the other. It's really both, because we know that local health providers are incredibly trusted sources of information, as they should be, and we need to empower them. But we also will be launching a massive public campaign as well.
Can you give us a sense of who that campaign will be targeting, what the messaging will be, who will be the face of it? I know during the press conference you referenced that celebrities aren't always the best, but they can also be effective. Give us a taste of what we might see.
They can be a part of it, and I'm sure many of them will be, and that we have a lot of creative ideas up our sleeves. HHS does, and there will be also work being done outside. The Ad Council just had an ad with a bunch of former presidents, right, talking about how effective the vaccine is. You know, it is going to be targeting communities of color, of course, communities where there has been historic vaccine hesitancy because of the history, of course, that we recognize and we want to address and make clear this vaccine is safe and effective. It also, though, will be targeting, there are certainly communities that did not support Joe Biden, that may have been supporting the former president, more conservative, even white communities where there is vaccine hesitancy. So we need to ensure that access is a big factor there, but we are going to be looking for creative tactics, creative options across the board to reach a range of communities that have concerns for different reasons about taking the vaccine.
And notably, during his primetime address, President Biden also referred to vicious hate crimes against Asian Americans, which we've been seeing, calling them, talking about how they've been attacked and harassed and blamed and scapegoated. Why was it important for the president to point this out publicly?
Because Asian American communities are still being targeted and still feel threatened. And it is quite an emotional issue for understandable reasons that a year into this pandemic, Asian Americans are still being targeted, and so are the communities. And he felt it was important in his primetime address to call that out, to make clear this is not acceptable, this is not who we are, and he, of course, wants to put an end to it.
And notably, a name that did not get called out was President Trump's, though we know during his time in office, he did often refer to coronavirus as the Chinese virus. And we know that hate crimes also increased under the Trump administration. Knowing all of that, what is the current administration doing to combat these challenges of hate crimes?
Well, there's obviously steps that could be taken by the Department of Justice, but we leave that to them. We're doing something new, and they're independent from what we do here politically from the White House. The president also signed an executive order making clear early on in his administration that this would be a priority, and he would use the power of the government to address and take steps to end it. And he also, of course, raised it last night. There's legislation, as I'm sure you're familiar with, that is also working its way through Congress, and we're going to take a look at that too. But we're going to look at a range of ways to address these threats against Asian Americans, and certainly addressing the hate speak, hate crimes that are happening in our country as a priority for this president.
And you did just identify somewhat candidly that some of the vaccine hesitancy is coming from Americans or people in the country who did not support President Biden. So have you identified, are you naming this as a group that is experiencing vaccine hesitancy as well?
I think it doesn't require us naming it, and it is a group that is experiencing vaccine hesitancy or has concerns or expressed concerns or reluctance, I should say, to taking the vaccine. And look, we're not going to return to a place where we're living the lives we used to live unless more people are vaccinated, more people take the vaccine. Access and increasing access is a huge factor there. And no matter your political persuasion, that is a huge factor. But we also have to recognize and be humble about the fact that we aren't always the best messengers here from a Democratic White House. And so look for partners and look for outside groups to play an important role there as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned messengers, and I know that last night marked President Biden's first primetime address, though many in the press have noted that Biden has not held a formal press conference. Why?
He will soon, by the end of the month. He's done a lot of short Q&As where he takes questions from the press. He does that several times a week. But look, his focus when he came into office was getting this American Rescue Plan across the finish line. We did that. He signed it into law yesterday to getting the COVID pandemic on a pace and a trajectory to getting it under control. We feel good about our trajectory, and we're looking forward to having a press conference before the end of the month.
Was there a specific reason that President Biden broke from the tradition of many modern presidents thus far to have a press conference within the first month in office?
Well, most modern presidents didn't come into office with twin crises, from a pandemic that is still killing 1,400 people in this country a day, to 10 million people out of work, to, frankly, crises with our climate, crises with racial injustice in this country. There's no shortage of work on his plate. Not that past presidents haven't had a lot on their plates, but he feels the American people were elected him to address those, and that's what he's made a good mark in doing so far.
And I know one of the priorities was the American Rescue Plan, which, as you just outlined, did pass. What was not included was the $15 minimum wage. Mm-hmm. I know the administration has said this is still a priority, but Americans want to know, when can they expect this? Will this be within the first 100 days, a new proposal?
Well, we are looking for a vehicle in Congress to get it done. The president wants to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. That's why he put it in his bill to begin with. And the reason why it wasn't in the final bill is because of a parliamentary process that happens in the Senate, which I know most people don't pay attention to too much because they're living their lives. But he wanted it in the bill and wanted it in the package. He has a lot more on his agenda he wants to get done, and we're going to work with Democrats, work with other supporters of increasing the minimum wage to get it done.
And is there a timeline for that? Would that be within the first 100 days?
Look, we need partners in Congress to get it done. So it's a priority for the president. He put in his first package that he announced even before he took office. So that shows you how much of a priority it is. But, he hasn't announced what his next legislative priority is quite yet. I mean, he, of course, wants to move immigration forward. There's some interesting legislation going on in China and competition, but there's more he wants to put out there about his Build Back Better agenda. And until he does that, it's hard to set timelines about what can get done.
And I know within his first month in office, President Biden made history in terms of the number of executive orders signed. We covered that. But shortly thereafter came the news of the administration's targeted airstrike in Syria. And I know many lawmakers, including Senator Tim Kaine, a Democrat, said, quote, offensive military action without congressional approval is not constitutional absent extraordinary circumstances. Congress must be fully briefed on this matter. The administration has exercised a lot of executive action. Knowing that, why wasn't Congress briefed on this?
Congress was briefed. The committee chairs were briefed, and then we offered classified briefings to members in the days following. But the committee chairs were briefed in advance of the strikes. We're also confident in our legal authority, both domestically and internationally, in the strike we took. It was defense of U.S. interests. There were threats against U.S. interests, U.S. men and women serving overseas, and the president's not going to hesitate in doing that. But at the same time, we're also working with Senator Tim Kaine on updating the AUMF on our war powers is way over. Our AUMF is way outdated. It's 20 years old. It needs to be updated. And so we're having conversations about that at the same time.
Will the approach differ in the future when it comes to military action, again, given the backlash that was had by some lawmakers?
It has nothing to do with the backlash. We're confident in the decision to take the strike, to defend the men and women serving overseas and defend our coalition allies. And we're also confident in our legal authorities. We had a whole legal process. And of course, defending our interests and defending these men and women serving is absolute legal justification. But the president also believes that the AUMF is outdated and that it's long past time to have a conversation about what it should look like moving forward. So the framework of that, we're not quite there on, but it's a priority for him as well.
And I'm mindful as we're talking about military action and the pandemic and the minimum wage, there has been a lot grappled with and lost in the last year. I know President Biden pulled out the tracker he has that he keeps on the back of his schedule or on a card of the number of lives lost to COVID-19. What has the president told you about these losses? Have you seen that number card before? What are the discussions like between you two?
You know, I would say he's somebody who deeply feels in private, just like people can see him deeply feeling in public as he did last night. And what I've seen over the course of the last few weeks is that he has the weight of the losses that people have suffered and the families and the children, the children who have lost parents, who have lost grandparents over the last year, and that it hits him kind of deeply in his heart. He's obviously experienced loss himself. It's something he's deeply connected to. And, he felt it was important to acknowledge that and spent a good chunk of the speech last night acknowledging what the country's been through when he delivered that speech last night.
And I know, in addition to President Biden, you have spoken about the difficulties that come with raising 2 preschool-aged children, just generally in your kind of role, but also with COVID-19. I know women and moms have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Mm-hmm. As you personally reflect on this last year, what have been some of your biggest learnings?
My kids are amazing and grounding. And I think many people have learned that, but also parenting and working is really hard. And finding that balance is really difficult. I think teachers' salaries should be quadrupled if that's possible. What they do is amazing and the work they do is amazing. I think what I experience is what I think a lot of working moms experience. It's very humbling and recognizing that it's always hard to balance, even harder to balance during a pandemic. And I feel incredibly fortunate to have had a stable job. I didn't lose my job. I can't imagine how heartbreaking and heart-wrenching that was to live through. So, look, I think as we look back, the impact on working women, on working moms of this pandemic and the challenge of whether we can do work as a country to recover from it is going to be maybe one of the next chapters of what we're dealing with here, because so many women, as you know, have dropped out of the workforce, have dropped out of PhD programs, out of a number of out of CAO track jobs because they're caregiving for children and for parents. And what does the impact look like? How do we get back from this? And the vice president's talked a lot about this, but as we get through this crisis moment, I have no doubt that is going to be an issue we're still talking about.
And of course, I know that you lead the first all women's senior White House communications team. Have you implemented any special traditions that we might not know about?
We do have a few men for diversity purposes, but it's primarily women. I would say tradition, I will say what I love about my team is that everybody comes to the table with a different perspective, and people have lived different lives, whether it's because they're women or men or Black or white or Indian American or Latino. And I think those different perspectives just bring something very different to the conversation. And it makes you look at issues and challenges the country is facing from a very different prism. And when I was starting off in the Obama administration, I was the only one of the only female spokespeople, right? Never mind kind of more broad diversity. And I've just seen a difference in kind of the conversations you have and even how you prepare to, how we prepare for the briefing and how we prepare to answer questions.
And you've said that one of the favorite parts of your job is that you can call up any expert and sort of get the 411. I wonder, at this stage, the American Rescue Plan has passed. We're in March 2021. Who are you talking to the most, and what are they saying?
Oh my gosh, I'm like a stalker of policy people in the hallway. I will tell you, sometimes I go get a snack so I can see who I can run into. I find the best way to be an effective communicator on my best days or on the best days of my team is when you are deeply knowledgeable about the policy issues. So you understand what the thinking is, where it's going. I talked this morning to Jake Sullivan. I just talked to Jeff Zients on the way here in the hallway about what's happening next with COVID. I'll run into Gina McCarthy on my way out. We often leave around the same time. So I try to touch base with as many policy experts as I can. I think that's part of my job. I'm not a weather girl. I'm here to kind of communicate the depth of the policy. And if I can extract it from them and get answers from them, which they are all very open to, fortunately, then I can be more effective at my job.
And I know you have a lot of policies that you're often asked about. During the press conference earlier today, you were asked about the administration's stance on the Bipartisan Journalism and Preservation Act. I wonder if since that press conference you've bumped into anyone or have any new developments for us.
I did send a note about this to the legislative team, and they were busy at the event with the members of Congress celebrating the passage of the rescue plan. But what happens, just to bring people into the sausage making, is after these briefings, we meet as a team and then we say, I'll take this. Let me follow up on this. Let me get more information on that. And I think what I said in the response to that question was, that's really interesting. I'd love to know more about that. And I would. So I've asked the question, but I haven't had a chance to talk to the legislative team quite yet.
Okay, well, when you find out, we would like to be the first to know.
All right. Sounds good.
And I know we are now in 51 days into the Biden-Harris administration, and the big indicator that we look at is 100. So what can we expect in the next 50 days?
Wow, I can't believe we're 50 days in, which is funny to say. We have a lot more work we want to do. I think the American people can expect to hear more from the president on his Build Back Better agenda in the coming weeks. Not quite yet. He's going to spend some time, as the vice president is, as the second gentleman is, as the first lady is, out in the country, really engaging with the American people. And you asked me kind of what he's like or what he's like behind the scenes. He's extremely focused on the details of whether people understand the specifics of his policies. So my bet is he's going to go out there and say, do you know how to get your check? Have you signed up to get, to benefit from this piece? Do you know what your local school district is doing? He's going to be very in the weeds on the details, and the implementation piece of this package that he signed today is hugely important to him. He doesn't feel his work is done. So we'll focus on that. And obviously there's more work to be done on COVID. We have made progress. There's still a long hill to climb. We're going to keep working on that. And then there are other crises we haven't spent as much time publicly on, but we have policy experts working on every single day, from addressing racial injustice. Of course, there's the George Floyd Act that's working its way through Congress. We feel pretty good about the progress being made and the conversations that are being had about that and what the potential is there. There's climate work that's happening every single day. John Kerry's jetting around the world trying to work on climate. Gina McCarthy is working on that here. So there's a lot happening. The thing that happens in the White House is there are so many different people and players and experts working at the same time, even if the president of the United States is speaking about one or two issues at a time. So we're talking about all that, and obviously a lot more always to happen on foreign policy. So more to come. It's going to be a busy 50 days. Everybody have a restful weekend.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jen Psaki, White House Press Secretary, for your time and all this context as well.
My pleasure. Great talking to you.
Of course, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. This has been Know This Live. I'm Zinkley Esamoah.